timing. We're really pleased to see you all here. I want to first and foremost thank our sponsors for being here, for making this possible. We couldn't do this program without your support. Thank you. So Prime Minister Takaichi is scheduled to visit DC in about 10 days. And with her remarkable relationship with President Trump, the U.S. and Japan have a truly historic opportunity to operationalize the golden age. If you're in the Trump administration, everything's golden. The U.S.-Japan alliance is on its way to being the golden age. Today also marks the 15th anniversary of Japan's triple disaster, the massive triple disaster of earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown was an international tragedy. But it also marked the beginning of a genuine transformation of the U.S.-Japan alliance. Many of the lessons learned through Operation Tomodachi have informed bilateral efforts to deepen the relationship between our two militaries, culminating with Japan establishing a joint operational command and the U.S. enhancing the operational authority vested in U.S. forces Japan. Today's speaker, General Yoshida, led the efforts of the Japan Self-Defense Force as it began its transformation to adapt to the new challenges. As Japan modernizes, the architecture that will guide Japan's defense enterprise to continue that transition, his insights will continue to inform that effort. So I want to once again reiterate the welcome to everybody, especially those who made today possible with your generous sponsorship. And with that, it's my pleasure and honor to turn the floor over to Yuki and General Yoshida. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I think that all of you here that are in person today doesn't need the simultaneous translation function. So, but if you do, if you are going to need, as the event announcement said, you will need your cell phone and a headset, and you should have all received the Zoom link for this event. So what you do is you kind of double sign in. You show up in person and you sign in to this event as an event, webinar, and then you will see the global icon called interpretations at the bottom of your screen. And all you got to do is just enable it and switch the language. Welcome to online participants. You all know how to work this, so I'm very glad that you were able to join us. So with that, what we're going to do is I will ask General Yoshida a couple of opening questions, and then after that, we'll try to accommodate right into a Q&A. So, General Yoshida, welcome.
Yes.
So you would, like John was saying, today is the 15th anniversary of Great Eastern Japan Earthquake. And it's a triple disaster that Japan experienced. And this was also a beginning of the deepening defense relationship of the two militaries. And so much happened in the last 15 years. And John already touched a couple of those bigger accomplishments. And you oversaw this process in various positions, and most notably as a chief of JGSDF, and then also chief of defense. So what are the biggest change that you think you saw in the last 15 years that you were in the service since that time to today?
Okay. Thank you, Yuki. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Retired General Yoshida, the former Chief of Staff of the Joint Staff, and now new candidate of the President of the National Defense Academy. So, first of all, thank you very much for giving me such a wonderful opportunity. From now on, I speak in Japanese. で、まず質問で、3.11 から15周年ということですが、
Since 3/11, it's been 15 years.
ディザスターリリーフオペレーション、そして原子力災害に対する支援。
The U.S. military's disaster relief operations and support for the nuclear accident.
に対して軍事的な干渉をしようとした周辺国に対し、米軍は空母を展開し、
and military intervention attempts from neighboring countries. In response to that, the U.S. sent a carrier that improved deterrence.
オペレーション友達に対してまず心から感謝を申し上げたいと思います。そしてその時率直に感じたのは
My sincere gratitude for all of that support. My honest impression was that how fortunate we are to have the U.S. as an ally. They truly are our friends, was my feeling. The biggest lesson that we got, Japan must lead its own defense, and the U.S. can support this and make up for gaps. This is written in the U.S.-Japan Defense Guidelines. So the U.S. will support us if we act. I think that we understood that very well. With respect to Japan's defense, we must play the central role. In other areas, then we can support the U.S. military. So we are supported and we can support. And this is the key to the U.S.-Japan alliance. This was a lesson that we've truly felt. A JTF was sent for, they called the Joint Support Force by the commander, Walsh. And that was our main lesson. Over these 15 years, how can we strengthen our own defense? U.S., China, strategic competition, the gaps in that. How can Japanese capabilities and postures fill that in? That's what we were trying to strengthen. I think there are three gaps. The rebalancing gap. It's a name that I've chosen myself. It's a time lag. China, since the Lehman shock in 2008, they didn't have much damage, so they got very self-confident and moved from a peaceful rise to a hegemonic rise in 2009. They changed their strategy. And Japan, in 2010, the National Defense Program Guidelines, it's the first time that we shifted to the southwest. Since then, starting in Yonaguni, which is the closest to Taiwan, we have bolstered our Southwest Island defense. And then President Obama put forward a rebalancing strategy after this. However, the U.S. actually rebalances when China, the relationship with China shifted from strategic cooperation to competition. From 2008 is when the China's strategy changed. The U.S. didn't rebalance until 2010. So there's a time gap of 2 years. There was a diamond concept, and it is at the basis of the Quad. The free and open Indo-Pacific. This was put out by the Abe administration. Even in the military area, as I mentioned earlier, the Southwest Island footprint, we expanded this, and currently in the first island chain, the self-defense forces became able to provide a basis for this. Also, standoff defense capabilities, counter-strike capabilities, we decided to get these capabilities for ourselves. So on the strategic level, the US and Japan can undertake escalation management. Also, the JSDF Joint Operations Command, JJOC, was newly established last year. Because of this, the US forces Japan is in the process of reorganizing to JFQ, Joint Force Headquarters. In the South China Sea, China has moved forward with fait accompli. This is probably the first time since we have our security treaty, but in the political and military levels, Japan is exerting leadership as well. That's one of the aspects of what I call the rebalance gap. The other aspect is the INF gap. As you know, the US-Soviet, US-Russia, INF banning treaty, 500 kilometers to 1,500 kilometer missiles that the US and Russia would not have them. But China has several hundreds of them that they have increased. So in terms of escalation management, there's been a flipping. So I think that Japan is helping the US to close its gap with China in this area. The third is a not yet filled gap. And it is the technology hegemony race between the US and China. Certainly the US is still ahead of China now. However, China is fiercely pursuing the US now. There is a possible area where they are ahead of the US in the information. In China, they have big data. They're competing on AI. There are concerns that China may pull ahead. So this gap has not yet manifested itself. But the US's allies, including Japan, can cooperate to innovate in defense. This can help the US, our side, to remain dominant in the technology race with China. I think that this can be something that we should place priority on moving forward. My last response to Yuki's question, I'll be direct. How did my impression change the most? Not so domestic, but I think it's important to look at it internationally. My good friend, Rob Bauer, 3 years ago, the former head of the NATO told me this.
Strategic message for the global deterrence than Japan's acquired counter-strike.
Nothing sends a stronger message for global deterrence
defense budget
than Japan's acquiring counter-strike capabilities and doubling the defense budget to 2% of GDP. I think both of these
Thank you, General Yoshida.
have changed defense perceptions in Japan strategically.
US Force, calling the Joint Task Force to support for Operation Tomodachi, Joint Support Force, and they were very purposeful using that term. So given all that you just laid out, and as we look, just the first quarter of this year, we had Venezuela and Middle East, and we're looking at increasingly fluid and unpredictable international security environment. And as you just mentioned, in the Indo-Pacific region, especially around Northeast Asia, other types of the challenge, which we normally call gray zone challenge, is the shades of that gray is getting increasingly darker. And I think it was in that context that the Prime Minister Yoshida first came out with a fundamental enhancement of Japan's defense capability. And this concept is actually inherited by Prime Minister Nakaichi, and actually she's accelerating the process. And as we are speaking, by the end of this year, Japan will revise 3 national security documents: security strategy, defense strategy, and defense build-up plan. So given all that you just shared with us, what are the key elements that we should look out for in the new 3 documents that we're going to see by the end of the year?
Thank you, Yuki. まず、安全保障関連3文書の改定においてどこに注目すべきかということを話す前に、
First of all, on the 3 security documents and the revision, where should we be paying attention? Before we get to that question,
それを私の試験をここで話をしたいというふうに思います。
our perception of the security environment, let me give you my opinion on it. In 2020, I think we had a historic turning point. A regional war globalized. Systems of power, systems of interest, and system of values of these 3 systems. System of power and the system of interests were given priority. The system of values took a backseat. That is to say, I believe that an era of power politics began. To put it another way, World War I, World War II, between the 2 wars, realism changed
20 years crisis.
Vis-a-vis liberalism and utopia. It was the 20 years crisis, according to E.H. Kahn. And I think that we had this again. So that's the first point. We're now in an age of power politics. One other point I have. I often talk about a reversed Cold War. The US-Soviet Cold War only had a Cold War in the first front, Europe. In the second front, East Asia, there were hot wars, the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Also, in the Mideast during this era, there were several regional wars that occurred. Now that environment has reversed itself. The US-China strategic competition is centered in the Indo-Pacific that is barely being held as a Cold War. However, in the second front, on the European front, unfortunately, there are hot wars. And we also have a local war that is spreading now to a regional conflict in the Mideast. Europe, the Mideast, and East Asia, when you consider them, we have hot wars in Europe and the Mideast and in the Indo-Pacific. We're at a watershed between a Cold War and a hot war, I believe now. Hypothetically, if the East Asia region had a hot war occurring, I think it will be a situation that would deserve to be called World War III. I do not believe that the international community could be controlled or could control it. So we must not allow a hot war to occur. To put it another way, revisionist powers, we must deny their attempts at regional hegemony. It's not just a problem for the Indo-Pacific, it's a problem for the world, for global security. I believe it's the biggest focal point for global security now. The US-Japan alliance's role in that, up to now, in the Indo-Pacific region, have been the foundation of peace and security. This has been said for a long time. However, now, the US-Japan alliance is an anchor for the global order. I believe that its role has greatly increased. One more point. The US-Japan's alliance's anchor is the military-to-military relationship. The U.S. military in this region to continue to have a strong will to engage. And it also has superb capabilities that they are maintaining. Military-to-military relations are the anchor of the U.S.-Japan alliance. In this respect, it is the anchor for global security. My understanding of the global security situation has one more element. Europe already has two wars. One is, of course, the Ukraine high-end warfare. It's a war of attrition. It's a past war, it's a current war. High-end platforms are being overwhelmed by lots of drones. And it's also a future war because both Ukraine and Russia are using a lot of AI. It's a cognitive war as well. In this high-end war, are we going to look at a legacy force, a current force, or a future force? Generals always prepare for the previous war, is what it said. But we must have to look at the future force in this and build up deterrence for the future. Something very tricky is hybrid warfare. In the Baltic area, from 2023 to 2024, Professor Yoko Hirose has analyzed that cyber attacks, cutting of undersea cables, GPS interference, election interference, and sabotage were very intense over this period. Also, economic and immigration policies were weaponized. This kind of hybrid warfare, Russia is at the same time it's doing a very costly high-end war. It's able to do a hybrid war. Why? Hybrid war is hard to see. It's low cost. The threshold is low. That's why. Therefore, hybrid wars are very easy to occur. We have to look at hybrid wars and high-end wars and prepare for both. High-end wars, we must deter, however we do it. However, deterrence is not effective for hybrid warfare. We have to be able to respond. We have to improve our resilience and respond. And in 2014, Russia took Crimea with a hybrid sensor easily, and there was a high-end war after that in 2020. So hybrid warfare can be a precursor to high-end warfare. Therefore, after a hybrid warfare occurs, we must manage escalation such that it doesn't escalate into a high-end war. This is very important. Another way of looking at it is when you consider all of this comprehensively. This is my personal opinion. It's not the government's opinion about the 3 strategic documents. On the national security strategy, the main objective, diplomacy, military, economic strength, technological strength, information strength must be revitalized, and we must be a major power. I think that's where the emphasis should be. Japan cannot just become a middle power. We must once again revitalize our national strength and become a major power. I think this ought to be the goal of the national security strategy. That's my personal opinion. Also, for comprehensive security and total defense, the most important topic is whole of society resilience. Let me tell you why. This war right now is the physical dimension, military to military. It's not just that. It's the whole state against the whole state. Physical, information, cognitive, in all of these domains. Which is why we must strengthen our whole of society resilience. I think this should be a central topic of the national security strategy. As to the national defense strategy, I think that the main objective should be to deny regional hegemony in the Indo-Pacific. And there are 2 ways of doing this. Internal balance and external balance. Internal balancing means fundamentally strengthening our own defensive capabilities. On the Ukraine war, I talked about the future fight and that we have to take that perspective. Already, in the 3 documents, we are demonstrating this. If we do something now, it'll be a legacy force in 5 years. We have to do what's next. We're already seeing a lot of drones. I think we have to have a 4th industrial revolution in our strategic documents. For this purpose, in the 1990s, for example, technology with GPS was a spin-off from the military to the civilian sector. Now the civilian sector is ahead, and we have to spin off the civilian technology to the military. an ecosystem between industry, academia, and the government has to be created. A system where this technology can be innovated. This is internal balancing. External balancing is strengthening the deterrence of the US-Japan alliance. When I was in office, we improved this strategic aspect of this alliance relationship. China and Russia cannot have the initiative in terms of escalation management. On the political level, we had extended deterrence dialogue. We have to have closer dialogue on this, I believe. Further, we have to expand our alliance partnerships. In the Cold War, it was a hub and spoke model with the US as the hub. And bilateral alliances were the spokes. Now, we have a lot of overlapping mini-lateral cooperations. US, Japan, Australia, US, Japan, Australia, India, US, Japan, Australia, Philippines, for example. We have to strengthen these relationships. This is another very important item that should be a focus of the US-Japan alliance moving forward. First island chain countries, second island chain countries together have to increase their resilience and sustainability comprehensively. I think that would be very desirable to do so. One more point. Earlier I mentioned it, but it's defense innovation cooperation. As you know, there's an AUKUS initiative between the US and Australia and the UK for nuclear submarines. And it's open to other countries outside of those three countries for technology cooperation. As quickly as we can, we should engage in this kind of technology cooperation to maintain dominance in the technology race with China. I think this is important. I'm repeating myself a bit. For the NSS and the NDS, that's my thinking. It's all my personal opinion. The government of Japan will be engaging in specific plans for revision, and there will be deep discussion, I imagine.
Now,
Thank you.
I am going to open it up the floor for question and answer. So, first question goes to Demi-san.
Good morning, General. Thank you. Dimitri from Financial Times. I'm curious, if you look at the conflict in Iran, the US is focused on that right now. You have reports that the THAAD system in South Korea, Patriot missile interceptors possibly moving from Indo-Pacific AOR to the Middle East. What impact do you think the Iran conflict is having on deterrence in the Indo-Pacific? And do you see any signs that China is trying to take advantage of the US being focused somewhere else? Thank you.
So for online audience, it was about the Ukraine and the what you can learn from the. If you can summarize it for the online audience.
What's the impact of the Iran conflict on deterrence in the Indo-Pacific?
米国によるイランの軍事介入についてですが、まず一つ、私は感じている
The US military intervention in Iran, first of all,
今年の初めに出された
One thing I'm feeling is that since the end of last year, we've seen the national security strategy and national defense strategy in the US. And the president himself has called this the Danro Doctrine. The Western Hemisphere is the top priority. The Indo-Pacific order being maintained is the second priority. I think that what's happening now is slightly off from that. The main problem, I think, if the Iran issue becomes prolonged in time, if the US is overcommitted to that region, then in Europe, Russia, and in China, in the Indo-Pacific, the revisionist action would have greater room for maneuver. That's my main concern. Let me tell you why. In the 2000s, including Japan, the global war on terror was something everyone focused on in the Middle East. During that time, China shot up its military power. It was still had been a peacefully rising power. But China then used that period to vastly expand their national and military power. If you look at the US's priorities now, it looks like there's an area that is not such a high priority. If there's a commitment that lasts too long, that might not be desirable, such that resources can be devoted more to priority areas. I think that is necessary. Looking at the military intervention in Iran, what will its end state be, I think, is something that deserves a lot of attention.
Make sure to use the Q&A function, not the chat. So I think chat is probably disabled for you all, but please do make sure that you use the question and answer box. Right.
General, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion and the remarks. My question is in regards to the fourth innovation for the defense industry that you have mentioned. What do you think is the largest challenge that Japanese government or the private sector has to overcome in achieving that goal? Given that the defense budget is growing and potential lift of a arms sale has been discussed at the Diet, so is it that we need more funding in that industry, or is it that we need more regulations to be lifted? From your perspective, what is the biggest challenge?
はい、ありがとうございます。今、ご質問からあった通り、
Thank you for that. As you mentioned, there will be deliberations in the Diet about the revision of those 5 categories. The third industrial revolution, speeding up military buildup. The problem in Japan is that the defense industry and the military in Japan and academia in Japan, their social structure is still in the industrial age. I went to art university. It's like Tokyo Technical University and Tokyo School of Fine Arts and a business school all in one. There's fusion at art university. Innovation occurs when there's fusion. When I was chief of staff at the ground staff, I went to Army Future Command in Austin. Where is it? It's at the University of Texas campus. Their joint lab has participants from the military and academia and startups. And everyone is wearing civilian clothes. And it's force design, it's upstream. It's the area that you think of warfighting concepts. It's a very upstream area. Industry and academia fusion is already starting at that stage. I think we're very behind in Japan in terms of our societal structure. We had a very successful era when we had high economic growth. And we are not have not been able to get out of that siloed society because we are a victim of our success of our high economic growth. I think that we can't have this kind of information without changing this. For example, looking just at academia, I talked about Alt University. I can't name the university, but it's maybe the university I went to, but university in Japan is bureaucratic. It's siloed. It's hard for there to be fusion with industry. Even if industry, you have the primes and startups, cooperation between them, I think, is still, has just started. Even if you look at our military, it's the same. To have lateral relationships and create innovation, I think that's our greatest weakness. The government can support this with a budget, but that's not the most important thing, perhaps. I think that we have to change our structure in order to achieve better innovation.
Online audience. So the question is in regards to the future technology gap that you mentioned in the outset. What are the fundamental capability that Ministry of Defense or Japan Self-Defense Force needs to focus in the coming defense build-up plan? There are a lot of speculations from everything from cybersecurity to nuclear-powered or I guess alternative-powered submarine. But what are some of the fundamentals that you think next plan to look at?
大変素晴らしい、私は今のご質問だと思いますけど、先ほど工業化社会と、それから情報化社会、トフラーの第二の波と第三の波と言いましたが、戦争のあり方も第二の波の時の消耗戦。
That's a great question.
技術として私は極大化したのは、
we have wars of attrition.
これが消耗戦を極大化をした。
The nuclear force has really increased in that. This has made wars of attrition bigger in scale. Network-centric warfare has also played a role. It can also be called information warfare. Moving from mechanized war to information war. In the future, beyond this, intelligent warfare is something that China is moving toward. Decision-centric, data-centric, I think will be the next move. What's important? What kind of technology is important? In an information society, it's AI. That's what corresponds to nuclear weapons for conventional warfare. So how much can AI be used in our military power? I think this is a very big issue. And when we do incorporate it, then how do we do so? The needs are a future joint warfighting concept. In the US, in 2015, there was a third offset strategy to have decision-centric warfare using AI. In the late 2010s, China was using AI for change intelligent warfare to information warfare. We haven't done enough in this area. To talk a bit more about decision-based, sense, decide, act. In sense, decide, and act in all of the areas, for us, we have to deny interference from abroad and do sense, decide, act faster. And we have to prevent them from sensing, deciding, and acting. You need cyber and electromagnetic warfare for sensing, and psychological operations using misinformation will be used. And for ACT, systems will become more and more autonomous, I believe. So overall, how much can you use AI to preserve your dominance? To connect advanced technology using AI. Also, organizations have to be transformed to keep pace with this. Legacy organizations will not be good. In Japan, we have the tremendous constraint of demographic decline. It's said that our population will eventually become half of what it has been. Our now labor-intensive warfare will have to change to knowledge-intensive warfare. Our self-defense members have to be focused on what only people can do. Other tasks can be automated or outsourced to the private sector. In this way, we have to increase the defensive power of the whole nation. So, future warfighting concepts and advanced technology, it's a trinity of initiatives, not just technology, but technologies and how you fight and how you create organizations. I think that you have to have that kind of comprehensive picture when you do defense innovation.
Go to another question from the floor. Let me pick up the second online because I went 2 in person. So this is the second online question. So this is actually the question regarding after the revision is done. Once the three security documents are revised, what are the biggest challenges in implementing them? Would that be budget constraints? Would that be constitutional interpretation or political consensus or something else?
まず、予算上の制約というのは、多分私は現在の3文書から、
First of all, budget constraints. The current 3 documents, I think, the budget situation has changed. It had been 1% of GDP, more or less. We had a base force in the Cold War. We didn't have enough resources to get out of that, but in the revision of 2020, we doubled our budget. And we were able to increase our defensive capability where necessary. So I believe we'll begin in this budget by adding up all of the needs. In the Abe cabinet, one thing that was done was in the peace and security legislation, the US-Japan alliance, limited use of collective self-defense was allowed. Compared to before, I believe that US-Japan relations have become more equal. systemically for defense exports, our policy will be changed, and we're talking about increasing our intelligence capabilities. I believe we will see moves in that area. The biggest problem is the international security environment and how fast it is changing. In the 2020s, China sees the US as having better military capabilities, and so they've used gray zone tactics in the South China Sea. But in the 2030s, if the economic situation is worse and the Communist Party uses more nationalism rather than economic strength in order to get popularity, then it could engage in riskier behavior. This was my concern. That was estimates that I looked at. But if you look at recent Chinese economic data, it's worse. So the timeline is getting faster. If you look at the China Central Military Committee, two of the main staff were purged. They know the cost of the war with Vietnam. And so there are no staff that can give this kind of advice to Xi Jinping. We have to make sure that our defense capabilities are strengthened in time for these kinds of movements from China. Looking at Ukraine, main concern is that they have non-strategic nuclear weapons and they can try to coerce non-nuclear states, and that they've become very aggressive. To put it another way, conventional warfare under the nuclear shadow. How can we respond to this? If our neighboring countries take such an aggressive nuclear strategy, how will the US and Japan respond to it? I think this is a tremendous challenge.
My name is Inose from the Nihon Keizai newspaper. So this is a question about in terms of the Prime Minister Takaichi's visit. And when I conducted interviews in Washington, D.C., I think there's a position focusing on protecting Taiwan. And vis-a-vis China, I thought that Takaichi-san will change her policy or stance against China after her big win in the election. I'm sorry, the audio is pretty poor, so it's really hard to hear. This is interpreted. I apologize. The audio is really poor. It is hard to understand the question.
I think one thing, Prime Minister Takaichi's statement is not very much off from our policy up to now. Look at specific cases. We have repeatedly said that our government will make a comprehensive decision based on individual situations. There is an information warfare that's using that conversation in the diet. And there's also economic statecraft in addition to that information war. I think it was rather medium at the beginning. In 2017, Korea was going to deploy THAAD missiles. This was the level. It's medium to that. And now we have rare earth. They're trying to increase the response of it. When we nationalized the Senkakus, they fanned up anti-Japanese demonstration. If they did this, if they used this heavy option, then unrest might turn back toward the government of China. Within the tariff competition with Japan, it's hard for China to use heavy options, I think. So, as for us, even there, as I said earlier, in a hybrid warfare, we have to improve our resilience. Strategic indispensability, we have to speed up, improve our level in order to respond. If you look at the information warfare that they're carrying out right now, we simply have to continue to speak the truth. If you look at before pre-World War II, things that go back to that area, I think we cannot trust that at all. So low trust information is being sent out by this country. And I think they're only increasing their own reputation costs. So we have to be calm. Economic statecraft often lasts a long time, so we have to be persistent.
So maybe I'll take those, I'll take Serena's question here and then Obara-san, two together, and then I ask them. So if you can keep it brief, that'll be great.
I'm curious how you think about whole society resilience in relation to information warfare, because it's not just SDF that would have to try to respond to that. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on how to build that whole society resilience.
So I have a question with regard to your recent appointment to the president of the National Defense Academy. What do you think are some biggest challenges in the education system in the JSDF, and what kind of change would you like to bring to the system? Thank you.
ありがとうございます。それほども非常に重要な質問だと思いますが、情報戦において大事なことは、一つは
Thank you very much. Those are important questions. In information warfare, international cooperation can be deepened.
これがとっても重要だと思います。やはり日本だけで
Synchronization of communications, I think, is an important point. Japan alone to send out a message vis-a-vis international public opinion doesn't have a lot of weight. So with like-minded countries and allies, to synchronize our communications is something that we should do. If you look at Japanese society, the need to share culture should be built up, because we get false information from abroad. So we have to have a need to share in order to have all of Japanese society share accurate information. And thank you for the NDA question. I'm not yet, have not yet been appointed. I don't know about big problems. I think the value of the NDA will increase. Why? Because the Japanese society will use more and more AI. Even if you use AI, what does not change? What are the... One is to set resolve. Only human can do this. 2 is set objectives. 3, make decisions and assume responsibility. 4, build trust. 5, create meaning and confuse the world. Only people can do this. So what are these 5 things? their leadership itself. AI cannot take over leadership. So I think the strategic value of NDU will increase. A lot of management can be taken over by AI, but just this leadership area will not change. Militarily, command and control, command has to absolutely be done by people. Control can be done by machines. In a new intelligence society where AI is being deployed, I think the value of the NDU will only
If I could
increase.
Please ask all of you to stay in your seat. I'll tell you why. He has a flight to catch, quite literally. He needs to take off to Dallas Airport right after this session. So I do want him to have a chance to swap into something a little bit more comfortable to travel. So if David, if you can shorten him. So if you can just please stay in your seat for a minute while he exits and give him that little bit of a break space before he takes off. I'll greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. It's an early event, so I really appreciate your time. And thank you for online audience. I saw many of his friends and my friend's name on the online audience too, so I'll share it on the ride to the airport. But and then also thank you very much for all of you for very thoughtful questions. And with that, I'll conclude this session. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much.